Cynthia Erivo stopped mid-sentence, walked off the Tonight Show stage, and did something that broke every talk show rule. The teacher in the audience had just shared a truth too powerful to ignore. It was supposed to be another perfect Tuesday night taping at Studio 6B in Rockefeller Center. The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, was in full swing, the energy truly electric as always. Jimmy, in his signature navy suit and infectious smile, sat across from Cynthia Erivo, who looked absolutely radiant in an emerald dress that seemed to capture the studio lights like magic. Her hair was pulled back in elegant style that showcased delicate silver earrings catching the warm glow. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant style that showcased the delicate silver earrings catching the warm glow of the stage lighting. The Roots provided their subtle musical backdrop, while cameras rolled around the iconic desk setup. Behind them, the New York City skyline twinkled through the windows, and the studio audience buzzed with the familiar warmth of late-night television. The air hummed with anticipation and electric energy. The air hummed with anticipation. That special energy that comes when genuine talent meets genuine curiosity in front of people who've come to share in something magical. Cynthia had been discussing her transformative role as Harriet Tubman in the acclaimed biopic Harriet, her voice carrying that distinctive blend of strength and vulnerability that had captivated audiences worldwide. Her hands moved gracefully as she spoke, painting pictures in the air. Jimmy leaned forward, genuinely engaged as he always was when speaking with guests whose work moved him. "The research you did for Harriet was incredible," Jimmy said, his enthusiasm evident. "I mean, you literally walked the routes she took on the Underground Railroad. What was that like?" Cynthia's eyes lit up with the memory. "It was profound, Jimmy. Standing where she stood, feeling the weight of what she accomplished. There were moments when I could almost hear the whispers, the careful footsteps, the heartbeats of people who risked everything for freedom." She paused, her voice taking on a deeper resonance. "Harriet once said, 'I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger.' The courage that required." She paused, her voice taking on a deeper resonance. Every step she took was for freedom, not just her own, but for hundreds of people who trusted her with their lives. There's something about that level of responsibility, that commitment to lifting others up, that changes you as a person. The audience was captivated, hanging on every word. This was what The Tonight Show did best, creating moments where entertainment became something deeper, more meaningful. Jimmy nodded, clearly moved. "And now, with Wicked coming out, you're taking on another iconic role as Elphaba. The preparation must be completely different. But is there a connection?" Cynthia opened her mouth to respond, her eyes already lighting up with thoughts about the parallels between Harriet and Elphaba, when suddenly the comfortable rhythm of their conversation was interrupted. That's when the voice from the audience cut through the conversation like a prayer finding its way to heaven. "Excuse me." The voice was soft, but carried the kind of authority that comes from years of speaking to classrooms full of children who need to believe in possibilities. Jimmy's smile flickered slightly as he tried to locate the source. Cynthia turned toward the audience, her performer's instincts immediately sensing that something significant was happening. "I'm sorry," the voice continued, stronger now. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I have a question for Ms. Erivo. It's important." The camera swung toward the audience, and there she was, a woman in her 40s, wearing a simple navy cardigan over a white blouse. She had the kind of tired expression that comes from carrying other people's dreams on your shoulders. Her hands trembled slightly as she stood among the sea of faces, but her voice remained steady. "Ma'am," Jimmy said gently, his professional instincts kicking in, while his human instincts told him to let this moment unfold naturally. "We usually save questions for after the show, but—" "Please," the woman interrupted, and in that single word was a lifetime of advocacy. A career spent fighting for the voiceless, a heart that had learned to speak up even when speaking up felt impossible. Her eyes locked on Cynthia with an intensity that seemed to bridge the distance between them. "I'm a teacher. I work with refugee children in Queens, kids who've lost everything, who've seen things no child should ever witness. Some are from Syria, some from Afghanistan, others from places torn apart by violence and hate. They're 6, 7, 8 years old, and they carry stories that would break your heart." She took a breath, and in that pause, the entire studio held its collective breath with her. "I play your songs for them, tell them about Harriet Tubman, about strong women who changed the world. I try to help them believe they can make it here, that they belong, that their dreams matter as much as any other child's dreams. But honestly, her voice cracked slightly, and the vulnerability in it was so raw, so real, that several audience members found themselves wiping away tears they didn't realize had formed. Sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I go home and cry because I don't know how to keep giving them hope when the world seems so impossible to change, when the news is full of hatred, when people look at these children like they're burdens instead of blessings. The studio fell completely silent. Even the roots stopped their subtle background rhythm. Jimmy looked between Cynthia and the woman, understanding that this moment was bigger than his show, bigger than entertainment. Cynthia stood up slowly from her chair. She didn't ask permission from Jimmy, or glance at the producers. She simply walked around the desk, past the cameras, and into the audience. "What's your name?" Cynthia asked as she approached the woman, her voice carrying none of the performance polish it had moments before. This was just Cynthia, the human being, responding to another human being in need. "Layla," the woman whispered. "I came here from Syria 8 years ago. I became a teacher because I wanted to help kids like I was. But some days..." Cynthia reached Layla's row and without hesitation took the woman's hands in hers. "Tell me about your students." Layla's composure finally broke. "They're so young, some only 6 or 7. They've seen things no child should see. They ask me if they'll ever belong here, if they'll ever be safe, if their dreams matter. And I want to tell them yes, but You're tired," Cynthia finished softly. "Because carrying other people's hopes is sacred work, and sometimes sacred work breaks your heart before it heals it." Behind them, Jimmy had quietly stepped away from his desk. He wasn't hosting anymore, he was witnessing. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in that studio understood they were capturing something extraordinary. "My mother was 15 when the Nigerian Civil War broke out," Cynthia said, her voice clear enough for the entire studio to hear. "She wasn't technically a refugee, but her home was destroyed, and she spent her teenage years running, searching for safety. She came to England with nothing but hope and a belief that her children could have a different story." Layla looked up at Cynthia with tears streaming down her face. She worked as a nurse, cleaning up other people's pain during the day, and coming home to 2 little girls who needed her to be everything: mother, father, teacher, dream keeper. "And you know what she told me when I wanted to quit, when the rejections piled up, when Broadway seemed impossible?" "What?" Layla whispered. She said, "Cynthia, every dream begins with a dreamer. You have the power to make your dreams come true because you have the strength to never give up." Cynthia gently squeezed Layla's hands. "But here's what she didn't tell me then, what I only learned later. Sometimes the dreamer needs someone to remind them how to dream. That's you, Layla. You're not just a teacher. You're a conductor on a different kind of underground railroad, leading children from fear to hope, from displacement to belonging." The audience was completely still, many openly crying. Jimmy stood with his hands clasped, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "I want to tell you something that Harriet Tubman said," Cynthia continued. "I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." She paused, letting the words settle over the silent studio. "Layla, you haven't lost a passenger either. Every child you've encouraged, every dream you've protected, every moment of hope you've shared, that's a passenger safely delivered to their destination. You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you're strong, because you've been carrying sacred cargo." Layla sobbed openly now, and Cynthia pulled her into a hug that seemed to encompass not just 2 women, but every refugee, every teacher, every person who had ever felt the weight of trying to build bridges over impossible chasms. Jimmy walked into the audience then, abandoning every protocol of late-night television. "Layla," he said softly, "I don't know much about teaching, but I know something about trying to bring a little light into people's lives every night. What Cynthia's saying, it's true. You're doing the most important work there is. But some days I feel like I'm failing them," Layla whispered. "No," Cynthia said firmly, pulling back to look directly into Layla's eyes. "Some days you feel human. There's a difference. The fact that you're here, asking this question, shows me you haven't given up. And as long as you don't give up, neither will they." Jimmy looked at his producers in the booth. then made a decision that would define his legacy as a host. "Layla, I want to do something. Our show has partnerships with educational foundations. We're going to make sure your school gets the resources it needs, not because we have to, but because what you're doing matters." The audience erupted in applause, but it wasn't the manufactured enthusiasm of television. It was the deep, soul-stirring response of people who'd witnessed authentic human connection. Cynthia wasn't finished. "And I want you to have something," she said, reaching into her jacket pocket and pulling out a small silver necklace, the same one she'd worn during every performance of The Color Purple, her good luck charm, her reminder of strength. "This has been with me through every role, every challenge, every moment when I needed to remember who I was and why I was fighting," she said, placing it in Layla's hands. "Now, I want it to remind you that you're not alone in this fight. Every child you teach, you're changing their story. You're giving them a different ending." Layla clutched the necklace, her tears now mixed with something that looked like hope. "And one more thing," Cynthia said, her voice growing stronger. "I want to meet your students. I want to come to your school, not as an actress, but as someone who understands what it means to be far from home and still believe in tomorrow." The studio erupted again, but through the applause, Layla's voice could be heard, clear and strong. "They're going to be so excited. They've never had someone believe in them like this." "Then we've all learned something tonight," Jimmy said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes the best interviews happen when we stop asking questions and start listening to answers we didn't know we needed." As Cynthia walked back toward the stage with Layla beside her, the cameras captured something unprecedented, a talk show that had become a town hall, entertainment that had transformed into ministry, performers who had remembered that the most powerful role they could play was simply being human. The audience rose to their feet in spontaneous applause, not the manufactured enthusiasm of television, but the deep recognition of souls who had witnessed something sacred. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jimmy said, his voice carrying new weight as he returned to the stage, "I've been doing this show for years, and tonight I learned that the best television happens when we forget we're on television at all." The episode that aired 2 weeks later became the most watched Tonight Show segment of the year, shared millions of times across social media. But more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about the teachers and everyday heroes who spend their lives building bridges for people society has forgotten. And in a small classroom in Queens, refugee children from 12 different countries now wear silver necklaces, gifts from Cynthia Erivo, each one a reminder that dreams don't require citizenship, that hope speaks every language, and that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a teacher who refuses to give up. 3 months later, Jimmy received a video message, Layla's students performing Defying Gravity in perfect English, their voices rising together in harmonies that transcended every barrier that had ever stood between them and the sky.